Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Today we continue our quest to plow through some hard old games, and after playing through the merciless Lion King, Toy Story is our next Disney tyrant to take down. In a similar vein, Toy Story was praised for its outstanding visuals and audio, yet still drew consistent criticism for its uneven and frustratingly high difficulty, especially for its target audience, just like the Lion King. I've got a feeling we're going to run into this type of reception and legacy a lot, because as we talked about last time, it's a result of an era where developers and companies were leery of players being able to beat their game in one rental period, when those stores were a big deal. So they figured we need to make these games super tough, otherwise nobody will bother buying them if they've already beaten in their 3-day rental period. Even more direct proof of this is the fact that the port outside of the US featured passwords so you could continue where you got your game over, meaning you never had to deal with getting sent all the way back to level 1. But in the US, they were heartless, removing the password feature and kept true game overs. Just so you know what this means, you only start the game out with, at the very most, 5 lives. Once you lose those, you're back to the start screen. That's how fast this happens. And Toy Story is not a short game either. There are 18 levels here in the Sega Genesis and 17 in the Super Nintendo. And we will talk about the missing one later on, but you must be wondering, how can you make it through a game like this with so few lives? How hard are we talking here? Oh, it gets hard. Really hard. There is no mistaking it. It definitely reaches NES and arcade levels of difficulty here. The only way to get through it is to not take no for an answer. Buckle in and kick those game senses into high gear until you grind for victory. So let's get right to it. In level 1, the goal is to free the army men from their container, knock down a walkie-talkie for them, and then the level ends once you get to the other. You can see right away, Andy's room looks really great, and it's a very unique style, which fits the movie, and it's because they use similar technology to that of Donkey Kong Country. And this reviewer commented on the graphics with what has to be some of the stupidest logic I've ever heard. The style makes him immediately think to draw the comparison of Donkey Kong Country 2, which is fair, but then he proceeds to say which Toy Story will lose every time. Okay, what? How are you going to leave the graphics section with Toy Story on a negative note since you're thinking of Donkey Kong Country instead of this game itself, the source material it represents, and not praising the shit out of it and what they were able to accomplish with this game? For all things considered and what we're normally expecting to see on a Super Nintendo or Genesis, this looks incredible. I mean, was he expecting them to surpass what was literally the unthinkably high graphical bar that was the DKC series? What the hell kind of comment is that? If you can't look like a series that no other game looks like, that's a negative mark? It's just one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. These graphics aren't just good, they look great. The characters look awesome, the background provides a real sense of depth. You can only imagine the amount of effort that went into the pseudo 3D effects on all of the background and furniture. They clearly went through hell and high water while putting this game together, and it'll only become more apparent as we continue on. These little stars really are quite important. There are 50 per level, and if you manage to grab all of them, you do get a 1-up, which is very big. It adds your total between levels, and once you do get to 200 or 300, we will go over what that does. Level 2 is from the scene where Andy is on the way back into his bedroom and all of the toys need to scatter to get back into their places, like in the toy box or under his bed. So you have a time limit to release and gather everybody to bump them back into their box and also help the RC car get unstuck by getting this Macho Man toy released so he can push the bucket to the crane. The time limit isn't insanely strenuous and just takes a little getting used to the overall flow and design of the levels, since in Toy Story you often have to bounce or climb up in order to reach where you need to go, which wasn't very obvious to a lot of kids. If you want the benefit of grabbing stars, you need to snag them before knocking block towers over so you can reach. Once all the toys are in place, you just need to run to your special place on Andy's bed and the level ends. Level 3 is inspired from the scene of Buzz Lightyear trying to prove he can fly to all the toys, but really he just bounces across the room. It's made to feel like you are trying to race Buzz, but no matter how fast or slow you go, he will always be popping up as you move along. Just need to be careful about moving too quickly since the rubber shark and clown toys keep bouncing in your way. Something to consider that is highly unusual about Toy Story is that when you finish a level, they don't even refill your life bar, which is crazy. So that means clutching out a level with 1 hit left means you're still starting the next level with only 1 hit, as opposed to a full life, which as you could imagine matters a lot, meaning you have to be extra careful at every point in this game. This level is where you're introduced to being able to use your pull string attack as a lasso to go from hook to hook. Although a lot of the ground appears to be a bottomless pit, you actually bounce and just take damage instead of death, which is a good thing that they don't extend for the rest of the game. After Buzz is waiting for you at the bed after he showed you up, Woody is feeling inferior, and the next level is actually an inspired nightmare boss fight against a giant Buzz Lightyear. Buzz is pretty simple, as you just need to whip away his orbiting shields and ducking under his laser. You can only inflict damage once the shield is gone and when he's looking down at his arm gadgets to teleport. After 4 hits, he will float away, dropping a bunch of stars that you want to grab as many as you can before they disappear. The fight's pretty simple and not a very big deal. Level 5 is where we control the RC car to hit Buzz, just like when Woody does in the film. Except this is a lot more complicated and challenging. There's a big track and you have to hit Buzz multiple times. When he does, he drops battery power for your electric car and you have to do this 9 times. While your battery does drain in the form of a timer, the Buzz locations aren't super far apart and you just have to be careful to coast here and there to be safe. You don't have to be perfect, but just consistent and recover from mistakes somewhat quickly. Each battery gives you a full refill, so it's not too insane. The cars seem to handle the same. One slight difference is that your car stops when you hit Buzz on the Super Nintendo, as opposed to being able to drive right through him in the Genesis, which is interesting. Something that I consider a major flaw is that even after you hit the last Buzz, meaning the level should be over, your battery life still drains, and you know, I got screwed by that in a big way in the Super Nintendo attempt, where you can see that the level should be over, but I lose a life instead. And there are no checkpoints on this level. Now that the star count is at 200, we can go over something special that happens in the Genesis version, but not in the Super Nintendo. It's a quick draw game on the Etch-a-Sketch where you can earn up to 3 hit points to refill, which makes a lot of sense to have since they don't automatically fill your life after the levels like we talked about. The Super Nintendo not having it is just one of those couple examples in this ongoing difficulty trade-off that we'll continue to see between the levels. But either way, we have 2 more levels left in Andy's room until we finally move on to Pizza Planet in the rest of the game. So this level's a bit weird, but it's based on the part where Woody is faced by all the toys that want to get back at him for what he did to Buzz with the RC car, so they're all here and capable of damaging Woody. And the other aspect of this level is figuring out how to climb up and over the buckets that serve as barricades and then whip boxes out of Rex's way, and have to do this a handful of times. It's just a matter of recognizing what to jump on so you can scale while avoiding all of the obstacles and enemy toys. One super obscure little detail to point out is that one of the things scales differently, where the Genesis has you using the bucket but doesn't work in the Super Nintendo, so you have to use the dresser drawer. After each stack of blocks knocked away, it does give you a piece of health back and a checkpoint, which is nice because this is definitely the longest and most involved level yet, but once you know where to go and have a feel for it, it just takes a couple minutes, and you free Rex one more time for Macho Man to finish this level. Now we have Stage 7, Run Rex Run, where we have some real excitement in this quickly scrolling level that is going to require some getting used to. And to be fair to the game, no, this is not fast enough to require memorization at all. You have good control of Rex, a couple different jump heights, and only tapping the jump button is enough to help you avoid most of everything. You can definitely reach its checkpoints and make progress with just your reflexes. It actually does a good job indicating a rhythm with its placement of stars, and you just have to be really focused. So while it looks like a lot of chaos, what you need to simply do is understand that you have 5 hits, the hit detection is actually a little generous, but the stage is quite challenging, probably not well suited for little kids, but I can tell you that playing it now, it is a fun change of pace from the platforming in Andy's room that at this point is growing only a little bit stale, so it feels good to end on an exciting and fun note, getting your ass out of this place. Next, we have another fight with Buzz, since this time he's confronting Woody for what he did with the RC car earlier. He'll tell you to watch out before charging your way, which you can jump over. The way you combat him is with a little tire of some kind that you need to whip off the ground and use your upward diagonal angle whip to send it flying. You can also jump and whip it too while it's in the air, which definitely makes this much easier, and it's more fun too since it keeps your hands more engaged. Buzz has the same type of life bar as before. You just need to land the tire on him those few times in a row and avoid him when he temporarily spins all around and flings stars for you to collect. So we have another change up from basic platforming, which is nice, as we sneak our way into Pizza Planet with the soft drink cup and burger box just like in the movie. The Super Nintendo starts out with a completely different looking hallway. I was relieved to see when this opened up into the arcade, honestly, because I was going to ask, why would you change this arcade into that? But now it's just an added detail. So you have to be careful with fries, hot dogs, and burgers that fall off of tables, plus soda cans that fall out of vending machines. Just need to not let Buzz bump into you. Important to note that he will stop walking towards you when you duck for cover, since he does as well. While looking at all of this food and considering where all of this takes place, doesn't it kind of make you wonder, where is the pizza? Of course this is a minor detail, but at the same time, we're in Pizza Planet, where's the pizza? As far as gameplay goes, the level gets pretty tough and has no checkpoints. It starts out simple enough with just intermittent food falling, but then the children start coming, and oh man, they come on screen quickly. It took me a few minutes to realize that those paper airplanes flying by are indicators of the children that are about to walk in the screen, so that was really helpful to realize. One difference with Woody's physics really stands out in this level too if you didn't catch it earlier. If you duck while running, he only slides in the Genesis version. And this applies of course throughout the entire game too, and there will be other points where this does matter, since not being able to do it absolutely makes running tight squeezes harder. This is a level that's pretty simple to grab all of the stars, and a nice opportunity for an extra life for sure. We have a pretty darn cool looking level with some tricky platforming inside the claw machine. The music is really cool and interesting. It definitely grows on you. I think the Genesis version is the better of the two. There are various sequences of moving blocks, patterns to observe, and then try your hand at it. There are obstacles like bursting pieces of who knows what. It looks specific and I guess I'm just not sure what these are. You have other obstacles like streams of tokens to avoid, and they implement moving blocks with coins in a really cool way here, making sure you have a tight rhythm. There are a couple of spinning fans that definitely provide some challenge in various parts of the level, but overall, they really let their creative platforming skills thrive in this enclosed environment. It was overall quite challenging, but it's nice to try this type of platforming in a new environment. Quick detail, there's this really interesting little nook of this level that is largely not figured out for me. Basically, I would always finish this level with 49 out of 50 stars and never knew where the last one was. And there's always been this dead end with these bursting things, and the Genesis has a stream of coins. I just never understood what the heck to do over here, and I never got anything from it, so I didn't know why it exists. It's just so strange, it makes you ask, what is going on over here? Now in the Super Nintendo version, I checked it out, and there are no coins, but after jumping around, I found the 50th star and a 1-up over here, so that was really awesome. At least I'll have some closure. Toward the end, you have 3 more propellers to make it through, and this is a prime example of running and sliding, making this much easier in the Genesis than the Super Nintendo. Either way, it's definitely not impossible if you just keep a sharp eye with your timing, maybe count the blades before you run, 3, 2, 1, that type of thing. The 11th stage is a very interesting one, might even have you rub your eyes in disbelief, but yes, on both of the Sega and Super Nintendo, they were full-on first 3D effects on us. It's a pretty short stage where you're basically grabbing the little alien toys and dropping them back where they belong. The levels between the versions are actually quite different, where you have 8 to grab in the Genesis but only 4 to get in the Super Nintendo. Even though the Super Nintendo's version definitely looks a bit more like legitimate 3D, I cannot deny that the Genesis actually plays better. Not only is there a bit more to do, but your movement is so much easier. I'm not even exaggerating when I say the Super Nintendo edges on the blocks catch you non-stop. They do have a moving block as well, which you need to get on the right side of in order to grab the last one, and that's pretty tricky, but in general, I only used 1 life on each of these before learning the level well enough to beat the timer and move on. One other little obscure aspect is that Woody says hello when he picks up aliens in the Genesis, which makes sense, but he just randomly says it here and there, sometimes a couple times in a row in the Super Nintendo, not indicating anything, which is a little annoying.
Hello?
Level 12, we have another boss fight, and you may notice at this point that the game likes to give you a boss fight every 4th level, so we have our 3rd fight at this point. It's the scene where Woody is trying to save Buzz from being grabbed by the claw, and the way you do it here is to whip outward to pop up aliens, then upward tilt whipping them into the air, so very similar concept to when you're hitting the tire. This level, though, is a major choking point in the game, so much so that the Genesis version took around 10 lives from me in a row until game over the first time I got here. The deal is, the life bar is the tokens that Sid is using to get Buzz, which is really neat. You need to stay clear of the claw to avoid damage, but they also put this weird fucking cord over here to make this fight so much harder in the Genesis, basically forcing you to fight from the left of the claw. Interestingly, they got rid of this in the Super Nintendo version, probably just a guess because they experienced just how ridiculous this design was and figured it wasn't necessary. Plus, it doesn't even make sense, what is this, a shoelace? They also gave much more space to work with too, so they absolutely saw this as a problem and made it much more playable for the Super Nintendo. Basically, as the fight goes on, the claw gets faster and faster when it picks up Buzz, and the window you have to hit this thing gets smaller and smaller, since hitting the claw too early doesn't do anything, and keep in mind, you only have a standard whip to pop them up before you can do your upward whip to hit the claw, and as the tokens dwindle, it moves so fast, so unless you're aware and scrappy enough to juggle these aliens on the fly, it's almost impossible. I guarantee that it's only a matter of time until we see some people in the comments section raging about what this damn thing did to their childhood, because the timing and accuracy required is freaking insane. Alright, so as the movie goes, despite those claw efforts, we still end up at Sid's house anyway, and this is when the platforming takes a serious turn upward towards hardcore. They do not mess around at all. The bottomless pits that used to bounce you back upward while taking some damage is actually a bottomless pit now. There are fireworks, falling darts, metal spiders, and you've got to really buckle in to play clean so you can reach its checkpoints. The music has an extremely annoying aspect in the Super Nintendo version where you constantly hear a metal rattle, and I just can't imagine anybody thinking that this sounded good enough to be finished. The details of Sid's room are pretty funny. The guy's painted as a huge villain, but he's capable of so much. I mean, look at all of his do-it-yourself books. And hey, what's so bad about enjoying some heavy rock? Or pirates? And a version of Paul Bunyan that I'm apparently just not aware of. Instead of a goofy smile with an axe, looks straight out of Doom or Halo. Pretty wild. Soon enough, you'll reach the part where Sid uses the magnifying glass to burn Woody. And this results in a couple of auto-scrolling sections where you simply have to press left and right with proper time to get past some of these spiky yo-yo things. It's pretty cool they have Woody cooling off in the bowl of cereal again, just like the movie, and after doing these 2 sections, you are on your way to the next level in Sid's room. This is where things get extremely serious from here on out. They throw a lot at you by this point. It's absolutely difficult to not only avoid taking damage, but the level's layout definitely makes you think about how to advance in a much bigger way than you've had to before. This is actually the very last platforming level in the entire game, so things really pick up in a wild variety after this point. But they really make you earn it, because this stage is full of enemies, obstacles, and a confusing layout. You also need to be better than ever at whipping yourself around at this point with the hooks, like a true Indiana Jones with the dexterity of Spider-Man. Simply looking at all that goes into getting through this level, it's just kind of obvious that you're not going to get through this on your first or second attempt, that's for sure, but it definitely does feel pretty good to play your best in order to make it through this craziness, with many sections requiring absolute precision with your whip and complete control of your character with a strong sense of direction here. The way to finally make it to Buzz is to nail these 3 hooks in a row, and you may remember that Woody uses Buzz's karate chop function in this movie. You get to do that right here. You have to push to the right as hard and fast as you can, because there's that creepy mechanical spider with the baby's head right behind you. And since they do let you face to the left to chop, I thought you had to chop that thing too, but you can't. It's invincible. You need to push to the right and stay away from him. The chopping function's a lot better in the Genesis, and the enemies respond in a less annoying way than the Super Nintendo, which barely moves them at all, so you have to be really precise with this move, otherwise you could get hit and go back quite a bit to the last checkpoint. Level 15, man, this is where it gets crazy, and it's known as Roller Bob. It's where you're making a break for the exit to get out of Sid's house, and my god, do they make you earn it. Nothing less than exceptional focus and precision is going to get you through this test. You thought Run Rex Run was tough? No, meet Roller Bob. It has to be said though, this level is incredible. I mean, just listen to it, look at it. It really is so cool. But you have to really get a grip and understand some basics to pass. It might be instinctual to do a couple things, like sitting toward the back of the screen, but you can't do that here because that's where Rockets and Scud, Sid's dog, come from. You might also jump or avoid things with too much room for error, making you hit other things if you're under the impression that nothing can overlap with Roller Bob, but they can. You just have to really focus basically on the square of space around Woody. Have to be in a good neutral location that can give you decent enough time to react to things coming on both ends, because they do. I will say that I felt like the Super Nintendo's version of this stage was harder. Those damn barrels that roll in while Scud is taking over half the screen seems to be that much harder to avoid and be in your face faster than the Genesis, but overall it's really hard in both of them. This is absolutely difficult enough to be the last level, but we still have a few left. 16th level is another big change-up, and surprisingly enough, this is what the Super Nintendo version left out. It's another testament to the developer's dedication to some real variety, and fortunately, it's not so hard compared to everything else. It really won't give you a very hard time at all. Just need to pick up the charging pieces for your battery. Maybe the Super Nintendo team just felt it was unnecessary with this level, but with their Mode 7 racers, it's just a surprising one for them to ignore. But like I said, it's really not that hard, and you can let the gas go to coast once in a while to make sure you stay accurate, and it's not bad at all. But another very impressive display of versatility by the Genesis. Here we are on 17, or 16 for the Super Nintendo. It's another level that isn't horribly difficult, but it's really annoying since they seem to have purposely limited your vision to such a point, and that's something I would consider the definition of cheap, because it's so unnecessary and doesn't add anything fun to what could have been a much more enjoyable level. But the deal is this: once again, you need to pick up your charge for your battery, and there are a couple of different routes you can take here. You just have to be careful and coast intermittently to stay as accurate as you can so you don't go all over the place if you clip a wall or a car to crash. Before too long, after just a few streets, you are on your way to the end of the game. Final level where we fly and chase after Andy's car. Here's one more that is sure to have crushed a lot of dreams of anybody that got this far in the marathon, with very tight squeezes and quick pixel-perfect type of adjustments. One interesting thing about this is Buzz does say "here it comes" and "watch out" as things are coming, which is actually a little helpful since it mentally prepares you to make quick moves. But as long as you stick all the way to the left to give yourself the most time you can, and hopefully get to this point with a few lives, you will be able to get through this without taking 5 hits. From a development standpoint, the end of this game definitely has the feeling of, oh man, we're finally about done with this project, and some of the stuff doesn't look very fleshed out or good, but who cares, who's going to reach this level anyway? And Bus also gets really weird around the moving van.
Here it comes! Here it comes! Here it comes! Here it comes!
There's also the aspect of not having the star counts variable figured out, which is more obvious once you finish the level, because I always seem to earn a second continue after finishing the last level, which is stupid, man. They definitely needed to space this better and allow you more than one continue with this game, because that's just insane. What's funny is I actually triggered this health minigame in the Genesis after finishing the last level. Oh boy, 3 more hit points that won't do anything for me? How could I pass that up?